Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Andrei.
Good evening, Yuri.
Andrei Illarionov is well known to the Russian speaking audience in the United States and worldwide. He is the one to listen to when we talk about the numbers and politics. His storied resume could be found out at the bottom of this video outside when you can see after we finish you can look up his accomplishments. He's far from being what's called I would call the Putin versteher, but his understanding of Russian economy and the piercing um glance that he throws at Russian economy and American economy and what's going on between Russia and Ukraine would be exposed right now. Andrei, I want you to explain the situation that's as it laid out. It is laid out in your article for Center of Security Policy, where you currently work in Washington D.C. My first question is what is the result of the sanctions, those terrible, awful, draconian sanctions that were applied to Russia by the West as of
Um,
now?
they have a very spectacular success that has not been seen in any case of applying sanctions against any aggressor in any case over the last century. Meaning that it is in the only case in which, after implementation of sanctions from the United States, from Europe, from so-called international sanctions, so it will be sanctions from the hell. Russian economy did not contract uh, in dollar terms, but grew by 21%. This is absolute record. This is the only case in the history of the last century when, in the result, as a result of all those sanctions, economy of the aggressor did not contract, but did increase and did increase double digit. And the economy increased, exports from Russia increased, export of oil and gas and oil products increased. Overall, export increased, government revenues increased, government expenditures increased, military expenditures increased, everything is increased. And now almost all those indicators are at the record high level. All of that happened due to the particular type of sanctions that have been implemented by the jointly US administration and Brussels authorities of the European Union. We had very intensive discussion back in February and March last year, discussing what kind of sanctions might be implemented against aggressor. So the authorities of the Western countries did not want to do what they have done in any other cases of applying sanctions against some countries like North Korea or Cuba or Iran or South Africa back in the 80s and 90s. In all those cases, sanctions of international community addressed export of those countries. And for example, in the case of Iran, the very important exporter of oil and oil products, so sanctions addressed export of energy products. In the Russian case, the Western authorities did exactly opposite. They did not touch export; they attacked import. As a result of that, import of Russia did actually collapse, contracted very substantially, but export increased. As a result of that, appears huge positive uh, difference between export and import, which is called saldo, the kind of the difference between export and surplus, trade surplus, and after that, balance of payment surplus, measured by hundreds of billion US dollars. As a result of that, the foreign exchange reserves of Russia increased, and the exchange rate of ruble towards dollar and other international currency grew up. And as a result of this, GDP of aggressor increased, which allowed aggressor to increase revenues, expenditures, and especially military expenditure military expansion that Kremlin is using against Ukraine and against Russian opposition. So that is why all these sanctions policy of the U.S. administration and the Brussels did lead to substantial improvement of economic and financial positions of aggressor and increase in the differences between military, demographic, and economic potential between aggressor and the victim of aggression, Ukraine.
What was the excuse for such an order of things? Why would they say we'll do it this time differently than they did it to Iran? Say
They did not provide any explanations. Neither the authorities nor so-called economists that participated in this process. We need to say that it's not only authorities, not only Madame Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury, or some other people from either American administration or the Brussels, but economists, American economists, European economists, some Russian economists that participated in all those efforts, and some Ukrainian economists. All of them fully supported these sanctions that actually improved position of the aggressor, increased the resources that aggressor could use against Ukraine and the Russian opposition. They did not provide any explanation, and through all these 18 months through which this discussion is going on, they only saying, okay, please wait, keep waiting. We're doing so absolutely right. So they predicted back in last spring that Russian economy would collapse 10%, 15%, 20%. That never happened. They said, okay, it's not enough time. Let's wait more. They were saying that last spring, last summer, last autumn, last winter, this spring, and they continue to say, okay, let's wait. Okay, how long should we wait? Maybe this year, Russian economy and the Russian budget indicators would increase again. So, and they would again suggest that, okay, we should wait even more.
how does Putin Russia, in your estimation, uses Putin Russia uses this windfall, this surplus, this enormous amount of money, I assume, in foreign currency, and the currency they can use? How they manage? They still keep stealing it, or they use it towards fighting the war, or they combine it in a certain proportion?
Certainly, we don't have the exact numbers, especially because many of those numbers became secret and they now are not being published by the state authorities. But it is evidently that a substantial portion of this windfall profit is being used for increased military production, military expenditure, for hiring more troops and using those troops against Ukraine. So certainly, we have some anecdotal evidence, but all of that suggests that the resources under command of the Russian authorities did not decrease, but did increase in the last year and a half since the launching of this full-scale aggression against Ukraine. You remember, and maybe many of our listeners and spectators do remember that in this last spring and last summer, many of the observers, including military experts, did predict that Russia would soon see a deficit in missiles that it is using in attacks against Ukraine. They say, okay, this is a limited stock of these missiles, and that is why sooner or later they will use full this stock. What we can see right now, there is no stopping that, and they're increasing use of these missiles and now drones and some other weapons against Ukraine. And we can see that regardless of all these propaganda talks, the Russian troops do have some resources and do have some military resources, and they have some military techniques. And generals, including U.S. generals, once again continue to say that Russian army still has superiority in some particular types of weapons like artillery.
Yeah, I assume, or I shouldn't be assuming, I know for sure that you may mean Colonel McGregor, Douglas McGregor, who's tireless in this assumption, talking about the higher fighting spirit of the Russian troops, etc., etc. And as as much as we had until now, we have this what's called President Trump is calling Russia, Russia, Russia. This Russia hoax. Now I feel like what's upon us is the Ukraine hoax. That's why we have this conversation in English, because information like that, I must say, pretty unwelcome on most channels in the United States, in Ukraine. So we want our American friends, our compatriots, know what is seen by those who know how this whole thing works. Because sometimes I have a feeling that our commanders, our commentators on Fox News, etc., they don't even read the actual papers whole, like indictments and stuff like that. They refer to the specialists and experts, etc., etc. So they speak of things that when I get to read it, I see they do not say what they said they say. So one of the things that is very painful to Americans in light of what I would call Ukraine hoax is how much money actually is being sent to Ukraine. What is the actual balance with the help of the United States to Ukraine? Can you speak on this, please?
Thank you very much for attracting attention to this particular issue because it became one of the most misleading and falsified issue in all those debates. We continue to hear that some prominent people, including some presidential candidates, claim that United States already has provided Ukraine with hundreds of billion US dollars of support. You are not talking about the presidential candidates, but so-called serious media. For example, Washington Post on August 4th ran a special article with infographic claiming that the United States, since the launch of this full-scale invasion, has provided Ukraine with 66.2 billion US dollars of total aid, military and economic one. So it is not necessary to be a special expert in economics or in military issues. It's also possible only to look into the website of the U.S. government and website of Ukrainian government to get correct numbers. And the correct number of the total aid provided by the United States to Ukraine over these 18 months is 37.9 billion US dollars. Almost half of that that has been proclaimed by Washington Post and then have been widely distributed and spread around the world, both in the United States, in Europe, in Ukraine, and in all other places. If we are talking about the military aid, so the same article, Washington Post, claims that United States provided military aid for 43 billion US dollars. And this is a false claim. The real numbers, actual delivery of military aid from the United States to territory of Ukraine is 18.8 billion US dollars, 2.2, 2.5 times less than it is officially claimed. So these publications, it's not, I mentioned only one publication, but there are dozens of those publications, actually both from left and right. Heritage Foundation recently has published another article claiming that the U.S. aid to Ukraine per household is $900. And recently, in one of your conversations with Boris Palant in Russian language, this number appears. And this is number, once again, is wrong, is a falsified number because the total aid from United States to Russia to Ukraine over this time was less than $300 per household and less than $150 per person. If we're talking about the military aid per person, it is $56. So
56, 56.
56, 56, yes, not 900. Once again, So that is why it's not only misleading, it's unbelievably inflated, and actually it's a false numbers that and they are being used in the domestic U.S. Discussion and debates about how much money United States already provided to Ukraine and why United States should provide more money to Ukraine, why not to stop it. And compared to the aid that United States sent to Afghanistan, to uh, Egypt, to Israel, to South Korea, to South Vietnam, to even countries of the Western Europe, France, Britain, after the Second World War, it's just incomparable. In many cases, for those countries, the aid that has been provided to Ukraine is many times and sometimes of a magnitude of order less than the aid that United States provided to those countries, especially in Western Europe. They were when they were in peace, and many times less than that it was provided to Afghanistan when there was a war. But United States also participated in the Afghanistan war, and the total expenditure of the United States in Afghan war was more than 2 trillion US dollars compared to 18.8 billion US dollars that United States sent to Ukraine. So this is absolutely incomparable, and that is why such publications and such statements have only one purpose, just to mislead American public and U.S. Congress and U.S. authorities about the real size and real amount of United States aid to Ukraine.
Yes, with the numbers that are circulating now, launched by mainstream media, nobody's safe. And I apologize for misleading people because we try to find good sources, and sometimes we are kind of in a heat of a battle, so to speak. We cite numbers that are off, incredibly off. But your numbers, where do they come again from? When do they come from again? From the government websites, right?
From the government of the United States of America. This is official data. Uh, it's not a fantasy. It's not invention. This is official data that anybody can get. Anybody from any users, including the United States government officials, they can look on this and they find all they coming. For example, military aid comes from the three main channels that have been used for supporting Ukraine: PDA, Presidential Drawdown Authorities; USAI, Ukraine Strategic Assistance Initiative; and FMF, Foreign Military Finance. So this is three sources, the three channels. Each of them have been recorded very accurately, and all those data are published according to the law in the United States. They are all known, and the economic aid that is being sent from the United States Treasury to Ukraine is recorded on a weekly basis by the government of Ukraine on the site of the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine. They scrupulously publish each dollar, each euro, each monetary unit that is being sent to Ukraine from all corners of the world, and everybody can go to the site of the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine and will see how much money has been sent from Washington, from Brussels, from Paris, from London, from Berlin, from Warsaw, from all other countries, how much they got, and they have a very accurate record of this. And nobody in the United States, nobody in Europe ever put any doubts on those numbers. So that is why it's official data. It's official data from the United States. It's official data from other Ukrainian partners. It's official data from Ukrainian government. So that is why it is, once again, it's not necessary to invent anything. It is necessary only to reproduce official data from sources, and that's all.
Yeah, just to send an intern to put a better glasses on and read the data and provide it to the person who reads the news on TV. but that obviously is too hard for our mainstream media and for a lot of us who are speaking on the subject. And what's going on in Ukraine is that they are. I had a recently pretty interesting talk with the Ukrainian whom I liked, and I actually had a conversation with him before. And he's under impression that Ukraine doesn't need any lend lease. They don't need the PDA does the same job, and that the how they call it the for the next year, the U.S. has budgeted $1 trillion in help to Ukraine. Outside of the last number, which is totally, I understand the hopes of Ukrainians. I understand they feel that they trust that the United States understands what's the necessities of Ukraine are, and also first of all, what's the where does the difference end up, in your opinion, between the numbers that are circulating and the hard numbers that you just cited?
Um, if I may, just there is no basis for anything. It's not only 1 trillion, which is absolutely unbelievable and unthinkable. There is no basis for hundreds of billions of dollars of support. One number that is relatively often cited is 113 billion US dollars. And this number is a adding up of four bills that the U.S. Congress adopted last year under the some kind of common title in support of Ukraine. Unfortunately, and this is the right number, 113, but this is 113 under the title of Ukraine. Not all of this money goes to Ukraine, according to the decision of the US Congress. Out of this 113 billion US dollars of this total sum of these four bills, the eight uh, aimed for support of Ukraine is only 76 billion US dollars. This is a decision of the US Congress. And the question is, out of the 76 billion US dollars that have been appropriated by the US Congress for two financial years, year 2022 and year 2023, how much money has been actually delivered to Ukraine up to date? And we have this number. Just a little bit round up, it is 40 billion US dollars. So, which means slightly more than half, about 55%. So that is why the U.S. administration not only not sent Ukraine these trillions or hundreds of billion US dollars, even out of those monies that have been appropriated by the US Congress for support of Ukraine, US administration used only about 55% of those money. And because there is only 1 month left until the end of 2023 financial year, it is absolutely clear that it would be impossible to use the rest of the appropriated money for support of Ukraine. Maybe a couple of billion US dollars in the end of August and the remaining September might be used, but hardly more. So that is why, in the very best case, the US administration would use not more than 60% of those monies that have been appropriated by US Congress for support of Ukraine.
Interesting, interesting. And the hue and cry that goes across the land of huge money being sent to Ukraine on account of having our own needs being neglected. Yes, we understand it, but not money. Actually, if somebody will be listening to it in English later on, I must say, friends, there is no money like what you hear that's being sent to Ukraine. It's not the case, and you can check it. You can write to me. You can write to Mr. Illarionov asking for pointers and pass it along to your friends who try to spread the information of the real expenses that are being dedicated to this terrible, terrible war. And
Yuri, if you allow me, just I will give you a
sure.
couple of numbers that probably would be easier to remember for our audience. The average monthly support from United States to Ukraine over the 18 months was slightly more than 1 billion US dollar per month. Once again, slightly more, 1.1 in the very best case on average. How much money United States spent during the war in Afghanistan for 20 years in a row? On average, 9 billion US dollars a month. So that is means roughly 8 times more than United States sends to Ukraine. The question, another one, how much support United States sent to United Kingdom during the Second World War to government of Winston Churchill when they fought Nazi Germany and Italy. On average, 40 billion US dollars a month. So that is why the support that United States sends today to Ukraine is roughly speaking about 8 times less than the amount of military expenditures during Afghan war and about 30 times less than support of the US government to the United Kingdom during the Second World War on a monthly basis.
Here's another question for you. And this is also for this part is for our friends in Ukraine who prefer to listen to the news not in Russian but in English. uh, for obvious reasons. They are talking about the LendLease, similar to what the United States provided for Soviet Union during World War II. There was it was a huge operation, and 90% of Americans we didn't go to bed thinking what's the new about the LendLease. They were just doing it. It was done beyond any attention paid to this fact in mass media. I would say there was no reports every day. There was no, again, pain and suffering of the journalists of all stripes. So should what's the return? How is being returned, this land lease? And Ukrainians are afraid that the United States with all its might will if the land lease starts, it has not started yet, but if it starts, if there will be some deliveries, if it will go, and they will have to pay arm and a leg for this. What is the what does the American Congress, the U.S. Congress, say about it? What is the how Ukraine is supposed to pay back, according to what is stated by Congress, what is stated by the White House? What is the amount of pay for the things that would be brought to Ukraine to fight Russian aggressor?
The U.S. Congress bill for Lend-Lease for Ukraine that Congress adopted on April 30th last year and that been signed into the law on May 9th by the U.S. President stipulates that within at least 10 years, Ukraine should not pay anything for these supplies that might be sent to Ukraine. This is a difference compared to the so-called traditional or usual framework for lend-lease that we saw in during the Second World War, and for example, for lend-lease that might be implemented for support of Taiwan, because U.S. Congress understand that Ukraine does not have such a high GDP per capita as Taiwan, and is not able to pay for those weapons and for the techniques of ammunition at the level that is being possible to do by Taiwan. So that is why they established a very clear procedure. They removed the time limits, 5 years, in the some kind of the basic law for Lend-Lease, and in the comments that the CBR, the Congress Budget Office of the Congress, provided, explained that at least for 10 coming years, U.S. Congress is not expecting any repayments from the U.S. From the Ukrainian government to United States. So that is why, for this period of time, this support is virtually free for Ukraine. But after the war finishes, and after Ukraine would not need so much resources that is supposedly must be sent to Ukraine during this war, both governments, United States government and Ukrainian government, would launch negotiations about the repayment of the remaining resources that would be left after the war. This is something similar to what happened after the Second World War, when similar commissions have been established between United States government on one side, British government on the other side, Soviet government, French government, and other governments on the other side. And we need to remember that not only the Soviet Union has repaid the remaining and agreed sums to the United States in year 2006, but United Kingdom as well did it in year 2006. So this is issue, but this is issue for further negotiations between corresponding governments.
Why didn't the West go the path that was so successful during World War II? Why didn't all the resources went like this without basically sending any money? This is the source of corruption. When you send the money, as President Trump says, cash to people to use it as you direct them to use it. We know about the LendLease in the World War II. There was equipment sent. There was not necessarily military, like Studebaker trucks were sent in myriads and thousands, hundreds of thousands numbers. There was airplanes, fighters sent. There was munitions sent. There was materials sent that would be useful and were actually used in production. I don't hear anything. I mean, nobody's must report it to me, but I don't hear like things that were sent by the United States to Soviet Union during World War II included materials to create the armored plates for the tanks, rubber to put around the wheels of the tanks, and a lot of things that would really machinery, the stuff to establish the industry of production, start the production or revive the production of contemporary arms and the contemporary equipment in Ukraine. Nothing like that is happening. Why there is such a difference in attitude? What do you think? Russia's not being taken seriously?
We need to distinguish and to be accurate with using the terms. It's not about the West. It's talk about different countries of the West. Because if we look into such countries like Estonia and Latvia that are part of the West, they sent munitions, weapons, and military support to Ukraine at level more than 1% of their GDP. That's not a big countries. It's not a huge countries. They don't have a very developed and very massive military production, but they have sent the largest portions of military support to Ukraine than any other country. Actually, last December, Estonia sent last artillery pieces, howitzers that they had in their possession, everything they sent to Ukraine because they understand that the main front and the first front in this war against totalitarianism and against aggression and against imperialism is in Ukraine. And that is why it is necessary to support Ukraine with all possible resources. If we compare the Estonian example with, for example, United States administration example, it would be shocking difference because the all military aid that the current administration sent to Ukraine is 10 times less in terms of share in GDP as a percentage of GDP than Estonia. And we understand that United States is not a small country. It's not a country without military production. It's not a country without military technologies. And it is not a country with military stocks. Uh, when we compare with 1941, with 1942, with World War II, then the United States almost did not have any developed military industry. United States started to develop military industry even before Pearl Harbor, even before attack on the United States, and started to produce new equipments and new techniques to send to Britain, to send other to China, send to other countries. Today, United States has accumulated huge stocks of military material, of techniques, of munitions they can be produced to fight the former Soviet Union and to fight the war in Europe against European countries. All those artillery pieces, all these armored vehicles, all these tanks, all these jets, all these HIMARS, all they have been produced to fight the war in Europe against aggressor. Now, in all these stocks and all these bases spread around the United States, some of them in military in the Middle East, some of them in Europe, are thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, HIMARS, missile launches, jets. They are staying there. They are not even used by the United States military forces. They are not stock. Some of them are outdated already, but they are not being sent to Ukraine. So now we're coming. If we put together all these, now not only dozens, but hundreds of examples of such a behavior, we do understand there should be some explanation to this. And this explanation is very simple. The current US administration does not want Ukraine to win the war against Putin, against Kremlin. Unfortunately, that's a very unpleasant truth, and that unpleasant truth has been confirmed by not only hundreds of these examples over the last 18 months, but have been confirmed by the publications in Newsweek last month, in which it has been exposed agreement between the Biden administration and Putin administration about how to launch the war against Ukraine and how to conduct the war against Ukraine, know how to stop this war. And one of the obligations that the United States administration took on itself is not to seek destructions of Putin regime, not to seek regime change in Russia, not to seek overthrow of Putin. And we know the main culprit, chief culprit of this war is Putin. He is the main organizer of this war. He is a bloodthirsty dictator who wants to destruction of Ukraine, and with him, this war can continue endlessly. So, by fact that U.S. administration understands this fact, but does not want to do anything neither by itself, nor allowing to do anything like that, like attacking Russia and Russian assets on Russian territory, U.S. administration does not allow Ukrainians to win this war. And this is a very sad, very unpleasant, to some extent shocking truth about this war.
Another less unpleasant, but it kind of strikes into the heart of what we're trying to do here in the United States. The conservatives who see the danger of Vladimir Putin and Putin's Russia is the unconditional love that the Ukrainian media has for President Biden. With all that you just said, with everything that kind of difference between the numbers publicized in the media again versus the numbers that are available but never quoted, never cited by anyone. Basically, I don't know of any. Do you know any American journalists that look at those numbers that you just mentioned? Anybody?
Frankly speaking, I have not seen anyone. And once again, this is a shocking because it's once again this is official data. It is not invented data. It's not inflated data. This is accurate data from official sources of the U.S. government and from Ukrainian government in terms of how much money they do receive on their accounts. So once again, this is a fact, and I have not seen that anyone would publish this data except of these several publications the Center for Security Policy did.
And continuing this line of propaganda that is praising Biden in Ukraine on all channels, I see, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I hear this all Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine as another operation to cut people like ourselves who try to support Ukraine by remaining American but patriots and conservatives. But we understand the danger of Putin, and we want Russia to be contained. We want Russia to be brought back to the line where Ukraine would feel comfortable to have them, and it's just something that needs to be done. And I think that they try just to make us not donate because they feel how much American people, actual, real Americans, not the ones you see on television, on channels, etc., talking about and edited, of course, as it goes usually on TV. Uh, how Americans support this Ukraine situation. It's not what presented on American channels, where every conservative in Congress, every Republican is against Ukraine and only talks about the corruption in Ukraine. What do you think? Is it some sort of an organized effort?
I think it looks like that American public in general fell victim of quite successful mystification or even disinformation campaign. Because it looks like that both sides of political spectrum found interesting and useful for them to use falsified numbers, not real numbers. So the Democratic Party and the administration are using inflated numbers to create an impression how well the White House and Biden are helping Ukraine, which is not true. But on the other hand, Republicans, at least some Republicans, think that if this is a favorite project of the current administration, let's attack it. Let's criticize it because it's a favorite topic and favorite project. And they're using this, once again, inflated numbers and falsified numbers, uh, thinking that they could attack the White House and the current administration for overspending. But and that is why we found something like a consensus, or at least some kind of mutual understanding of two sides in creating inflated and wrong picture about the real size of support to Ukraine.
And characteristically, the real beneficiary of all this, what you just described, is Putin's Russia.
Absolutely, because and Putin, the third wing or third force that is so much interested in overestimating the actual support from the United States to Ukraine. They could say, "Oh, look how much money, how much resources they put to Ukraine," and they cannot, first of all, to get breakthrough in the south of Ukraine, and that is why there's another confirmation, indirect confirmation, how strong is the Russian army. It's one hand. On the other hand, they would definitely fuel this debate in the United States, saying that it's too much, and that is why let's cut this support for Ukraine. It would be easier for Putin to continue his aggression against Ukraine. So that is why we found something when the three most important forces in this situation, two in the United States and one in Russia, are united in their business of disinforming American audience, American public, and the public around the world.
It's all very disconcerting, and it's bothering me a great deal when we spend such a certain amount of effort. I wouldn't say that it's gigantic, but we try to help. We try to help Ukraine and save human lives by sending the medical stuff and equipment, and it's just we feel this force working against us. That's why I'm bringing this up. And let's talk about something that would be of definite interest to our Ukrainian friends and to our American friends. And the Russian version of it, I heard on your remarkable webcast with our common friend Yura Tabach, Captain U.S. Navy retired, who's now in Ukraine. And this is about the life of diplomats in Washington, D.C., Ukrainian diplomats, namely the ambassador of Ukraine. First name eludes me. Markarova is the last name. Everybody knows this lady, anybody who follows the situation in Ukraine. So she was recently assigned as ambassador to Antigua and Barbuda. So, does Antigua and Barbuda, a country that has economic ties with, do they provide any assistance to Ukraine? What was
Uh,
the
Nobody heard about anything. And Antigua Barbuda is not such a country that actually physically, economically is able to do anything for Ukraine, based on the location, based on the
It's in the
logistics.
Caribbean, right?
Yes, but it has wonderful white sand beaches. It's wonderful climate, and especially in some kind of Washington winter, it's much nicer to spend long nights and days just looking on the sunset in Caribbean rather than in Washington. But also, Antigua is very well known. Somebody told me that for money laundering operations. So that is why there is something to do in Antigua Barbuda during long winter nights in Washington. And especially this is shocking since during these 18 months full-scale invasion against Ukraine, the supply of military stuff to Ukraine is number one priority for any diplomat from Ukraine, and especially number one diplomat in the world, the plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine in the United States. And the United States has the largest military-industrial complex, has largest military stocks, and can provide the largest and the most important, the most modern support for Ukraine. And it looks like that the Madame Ambassador is not so busy in that business if she is so readily accept this position to spend not to spend all the time in Washington and the United States trying to agree, just trying to make contracts or to establish contacts between U.S. producers and Ukrainian military just for support of Ukrainian military forces. Looks like she has enough time not only to open her restaurant in Washington, D.C., but also to spend some time in Antigua Barbuda. I would add to this wonderful CV of that person is that she is one of the active spreader of of the falsified information about the military aid to Ukraine. We understand why this business is being done by Putin and by his people in Kremlin. We do have some understanding, even we do not agree with that, why some Republicans or some Democrats are inflating these numbers. But there is no any logical explanation why the representative of the U.S. of the Ukrainian government would continue to spread falsified information about the size, about the amount of U.S. support to Ukraine. And this active position of the Madame Ambassador is contributing enormously to shifting political climate in the United States about in order uh, to reduce such support from the United States to Ukraine. It is very hard to find another example when the ambassador of the country that happened to be a victim of aggression would work so hard, so well, and so persistently in favor of aggressor against own country.
It's amazing. I was wondering, I mean, I was marveling at the group of Ukrainians, and you came to support them as well. They were standing in front of the White House and demanding the start of the actual lend lease, actual flow of equipment, as we discussed a number of times during even this podcast, and you talk about it, and Yura Tabach talks about it, and we all kind of amazed why this tested way of support is not implemented. So Markarova arranged a counter rally, right? From what I heard in Washington, she bussed some supporters just to silence those people, the group of people that were demonstrating, and they were doing some other things that just demonstrate fighting spirits of Ukraine, etc. All the good things against all the bad things, but not demanding what would really help Ukraine fight and win this war. It's just
Unfortunately, unfortunately, the situation is even worse because the Madame Ambassador launched a blackmail campaign against those Ukrainians and the US citizens with Ukrainian background who are arguing, who are campaigning for increase of military support from the United States to Ukraine. And against those people, this lady launched this campaign of putting dirt on them, blackmailing them, and blackmailing all organizations and all people who wanted to support this rally for increase of military support from the United States to Ukraine. And as I learned recently, this campaign has been widened to include not only Ukrainian organizations, but even Russian civil society organizations based in Washington. Some of those people, we are very familiar with each other, and they told me that they could not participate in these actions for supporting Ukraine because they received warnings from the Ukrainian embassy not to participate in it and not to rally, not to campaign in support of Ukraine, in support of more military aid to Ukraine. And all this comes from the Ukrainian embassy in Washington. So that is why we have many, many cases when this particular person is working very hard and very persistently in favor of aggressor against Ukraine and those who support Ukraine outside of Ukraine, including in the United States.
It's a hard choice for me to find a question that would end our conversation today, because we agreed on an hour, and a lot of questions I would ask you, and not moral questions, of course, because we all decide for ourselves how long we can go and fight this Leviathan that is a combination today of the Russia and Ukrainian way of behaving in Washington, unfortunately, and of course our bureaucratic administration and machine headed by Joe Biden. But I would ask you this: if Donald Trump, I would say when, but let's keep it at if, becomes the president of the United States, how this may change?
To be sure, we don't know. Because we know that politicians do say some words, and after that they are doing some other deeds. So that is why what is being promised today before election, that is addressed first of all the audience, the potential electorate, and what will be done after that. We cannot make our constructions based on the words that have been said today. But what can be used as some kind of as a sign, what might be policy if some particular person is being elected as a president of the United States, to look into the policies, the real actions of that person if that person was the president of the United States. In the case of Mr. Trump, we know that. And we know what he did, not only what he was saying, but what he was doing during his fourth-year term towards Ukraine, not only towards Israel, not towards Middle East, not towards Iran, not towards North Korea. It's very well known, but also what he did towards Ukraine.
Green.
What he did, the number of Ukrainian military personnel that died on the line between the Russian troops and Ukrainian troops in Donbass fell 16 times. Mr. Putin never launched any new aggression under during the time of Trump presidency. Putin launched aggressions against somebody during each and every American presidency. During Clinton presidency, he attacked Chechnya. During Bush presidency, he attacked Georgia. During Obama presidency, he attacked Syria, and he attacked first time Ukraine. He attacked with large-scale aggression against Ukraine under Biden, and Putin did not launch any attack against anyone during 4 years of Trump. So Trump provided Ukraine with real military weapons in year 2017, year 2017 and 18, when Javelin had been shipped from the United States under the order of Trump. Under the Trump, the Secretary of State Pompeo has made a proclamation that United States will never accept annexation of Crimea. It is similar to statement that has been made in July 1940 when the Soviet Union occupied and annexed three Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So the United States made this statement and proclamation that United States would never accept this annexation. Remarkably, that the annexation of Crimea that happened under Obama did not lead to any statement, neither from Mr. Obama, nor from Mr. Biden, who was the vice president at that time, nor from the Secretary of State of that time about this annexation. Moreover, since January 21, when Mr. Obama became president of the United States, neither him, nor his vice president, nor Secretary of State Blinken never made any similar statements about inability of the United States to accept this annexation. So that is why, putting them together, once again, we cannot claim that we know for sure what will happen under Mr. Trump, but we have some history of his actions from year 2017 to year 2021. I did not mention, for example, sanctions against Nord Stream 2, which stopped construction of this pipeline, and that has been resumed only when Mr. Biden came to the White House. So that is why we have some kind of history that allows us to think about what kind of policy might be if Mr. Trump would again become president of the United States.
Dear Andrei, thank you so very much for this conversation. I think it was very necessary for many of us here, and I think that it will get some good reception in the community of those Americans who want to know more about the reality presented by facts and, of course, the emotion and the passion that we ready to share here with regards to the situation that is front of us that needs to be resolved. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Yuri. All the best to our audience.